The open marriage experiment. A husband's unexpected revenge. I smelled the coffee before I opened my eyes. Rich, dark, just the way I liked it. For 25 years, Diana had brewed it for me every morning. It was a small ritual, one of those quiet, unnoticed acts that make a marriage run smoothly. But today, the air in the kitchen was different. I walked in to find her already seated at the breakfast table, staring down at a plain manila folder. The morning light from the window caught in her hair, turning the brown strands gold. She looked beautiful. She always had, but there was something in the set of her shoulders, in the way she gripped the edge of the table, that made my stomach tighten. I slid into my chair, unfolding the newspaper more out of habit than interest. Diana didn't touch her coffee. That was my second clue. Darling, I was thinking, for words spoken carefully, like she was testing their weight. I turned a page, pretending not to notice the slight tremor in her voice. About what? She took a deep breath, as if steadying herself. Our lives have become predictable. I finally looked up. The woman in front of me was the same one I'd built a life with, the same one who had laughed at my terrible jokes, held my hand through family funerals, and whispered my name in the dark. But something about her eyes unsettled me. You say that like it's a bad thing, I said. Diana smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Not bad, just safe. Routine. She glanced at the folder in front of her, then back at me. I love you, Teddy. You know that, right? I nodded slowly. Of course. She licked her lips. And you love me? A ridiculous question. Diana. Please, she interrupted. Just answer. I sighed. Yes, always. She exhaled, relieved, then looked down at her hands. I've only ever been with you, she said, voice quiet, since I was 18. I stilled. A prickle of unease crept up my spine. I don't regret that, she hurried to say. I wouldn't change it for anything. But lately, I can't help wondering what I've missed. The room was suddenly too quiet, the air thick. You want to sleep with someone else, I said, my voice flat. Diana flinched. That's not what isn't it? Her fingers curled into fists. It's not about not loving you. It's about, she hesitated, experience, curiosity. Curiosity, I echoed. Yes. She swallowed. And I thought, maybe we could talk about it. Maybe we could try something new. I stared at her. The woman I had built a life with was asking for permission to invite another man into our marriage. But it wasn't just permission, was it? She had already made up her mind. She wanted this. I leaned back in my chair, studying her, letting the silence stretch. Finally, I said, go on. Diana blinked, clearly surprised that I hadn't erupted. Denise and I were talking, she said cautiously, and she told me that. I scoffed. Denise. Of course. Diana flushed. She's just been opening my eyes, making me think. I tapped my fingers on the table, staring at her. And what exactly have you and Denise been thinking about? Diana hesitated, then pushed the folder toward me. I picked it up, flipped it open, and felt my stomach turn. Inside was a contract. Neatly typed, precise, with legal language that made my blood run cold. There were clauses about discretion, financial security, boundaries, a carefully structured arrangement for my wife to sleep with other men. I turned the page, and my stomach dropped further. It wasn't just a contract. It had been drafted by Bobby. Bobby, my law partner, my friend. I looked up at Diana. He wrote this. My voice was dangerously calm. He's a lawyer, Teddy, she said quickly. I just want to make sure it was done right. I barked out a laugh. Oh, so this is serious then? Not just pillow talk with Denise. Diana paled. I wanted to talk to you first. Did you? I snapped the folder shut. Because it looks to me like you already made a decision. She pressed her lips together. I knew that look. She had. I sat there for a long moment, the weight of it settling in my chest. My wife, my partner of 25 years, wanted an open marriage. She had already spoken to a lawyer about it, already imagined what it would be like to be with another man. And she had only told me now, when the paperwork was in front of me. A slow, unfamiliar anger built in my gut, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I picked up the pen beside the folder. Diana sucked in a breath. Teddy. I signed my name at the bottom of the contract and slid it back to her. She gaped at me. You're okay with this? I smiled, slow and deliberate. If you're free, so am I. Diana's breath hitched. For the first time in our marriage, I saw something in her eyes that I had never seen before. Fear. Diana stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the strap of her red dress. The silk clung to her body in a way that made my jaw clench. Not because I was admiring her, though I once would have. No, this was different. This was my wife, standing in our bedroom, getting ready for another man. She fastened a diamond earring, the ones I had given her on our 20th anniversary. A gift of love, a promise of forever. Now, they were just accessories for a night of infidelity. I watched from the doorway, arms crossed, leaning against the frame. You look nice, I said. My voice was even, unreadable. She turned, startled. Maybe she expected me to sulk, to rage, to beg her not to go. Instead, I was calm, and that, I could see, unnerved her. Thank you, she said hesitantly. Denise is picking me up soon. Of course, Denise, the architect of this disaster, the one who had planted the idea in my wife's head that she was missing out, that she needed to explore before it was too late. I stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. Diana stiffened. I reached for her chin, tilting her face toward me. For a moment, she let out a shaky breath, expecting, what? A last-minute plea? A desperate kiss? Instead, I simply studied her. Are you nervous? I asked. She swallowed hard. A little. I smirked. Why? Isn't this what you wanted? Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. Before she could answer, the doorbell rang. Denise. Diana exhaled sharply, stepping back, composing herself. She grabbed her clutch and made her way to the door, her heels clicking against the hardwood. I followed. And then I saw her. Denise, in a low-cut black dress, a wicked grin curling her lips. The kind of woman who thrived on chaos. Her eyes flicked over me, lingering. Well, she purred. Teddy, you're looking. She let her gaze trail down my chest, my arms, my hands. Dangerous tonight. Diana shot her a glare. Denise just laughed. Then, an idea hit me. A slow-burning, dangerous idea. I turned to Denise. You look good too. She arched a brow. Do I? I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. Close enough that I could smell her perfume. Close enough that she felt my presence. Then, without hesitation, I grabbed her face and kissed her. Not a polite kiss. Not a peck. A deep, hungry, possessive kiss. Denise let out a soft moan of surprise, her body melting into mine. I felt her fingers graze my chest, her breath hitching. Diana gasped behind us. When I pulled away, Denise's lips were swollen, her eyes half-lidded with something dark and amused. Teddy, she whispered, breathless. I turned to my wife. You have your night, Diana, I said calmly, wiping my thumb across my lips. I'll have mine. Diana just stared at me. Her face was unreadable, shock, jealousy, something else. Something that told me she hadn't expected this. Denise let out a throaty laugh, touching her lips. Oh, Teddy, I knew you had it in you. Diana swallowed hard. Let's go. But her voice was different now. Tense, off balance. She walked out the door, and Denise followed, throwing me one last wicked glance before disappearing into the night. I closed the door behind them. Then I grabbed my coat and keys. Denise had her fun corrupting my wife. Now it was my turn. Diana was quiet that morning. Too quiet. I watched her across the breakfast table as she stirred her coffee, but she never took a sip. Just around and around, the spoon clinking softly against the porcelain. Her hair, normally smooth and styled, was tangled at the ends. Dark circles rimmed her eyes. She looked like a woman who had seen something she couldn't unsee. Finally, she spoke. Denise told me you were incredible, she murmured, eyes still locked on the swirling liquid in her cup. The best she's ever had. I took my time answering, lifted my coffee, took a slow sip, held her gaze when I set it back down. Good to know, I said. Diana flinched. She wasn't expecting that. Maybe she thought I'd dismiss it. Maybe she wanted me to reassure her, to downplay it, to make her feel less disposable. But I didn't. She had cracked open a door, and now she was seeing what lay on the other side. I told her sex with you had become routine, she admitted after a long pause. Her voice was barely above a whisper, that sometimes I just wanted to get it over with. I didn't react, though her words were a dagger to the gut. She wasn't saying it to be cruel. She was confessing, the way sinners do when they realize the weight of their sins. But Denise called me an idiot, she continued. She said I didn't know what I had. I let her sit in that, let her feel the full weight of what she had given away so carelessly. Diana's fingers tightened around her mug. Her knuckles were white. Teddy, she finally looked at me. Can we stop this? It was stupid. It was a mistake. I tilted my head slightly, considering her. The woman I had loved for 25 years, the woman who had looked me in the eye and asked for permission to sleep with other men, was now sitting in front of me, pleading to undo it. I set my mug down. You wanted this, Diana, I said, my voice calm measured. You made a choice, and now you're having second thoughts. Not because you regret what you did, but because you don't like the way it feels. Her lips parted, but no words came out. You thought you'd hold all the power, I continued, my gaze unwavering. That I'd sit at home, waiting, while you explored your options. But now, you see it differently. Now, you see me differently. Tears welled in her eyes. I thought it would be different, she whispered. So did I. I'll let that linger. The silence between us stretched thin, taut, like a rope fraying at the edges. Then, she reached for my hand. Her fingers trembled as they touched mine, desperate, seeking warmth, connection, something she had willingly let slip through her fingers. I love you, she choked out. I don't want to lose you. I didn't move. Did she mean that? Or did she just not want to lose what she had always assumed was hers? I exhaled slowly. That door doesn't close so easily, Diana. A single tear slipped down her cheek. And for the first time in our marriage, she was the one afraid of losing me. The thing about Bobby was that she never hesitated. In the courtroom, in business, in life, she went after what she wanted. And right now, what she wanted was me. She sat across from me at a dimly lit restaurant, her glass of wine barely touched. The candlelight cast flickering shadows on her sharp features, high cheekbones, dark eyes that always seemed to know more than they let on. She smirked, swirling the wine in her glass. So, how's married life now that the doors have been kicked wide open? I exhaled slowly. It's different. Different. She let the word hang in the air, a wry amusement playing on her lips. That's a polite way of saying Diana's regretting it, isn't she? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Bobby knew. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, studying me like a cat watching a bird in a cage. I told her this would happen. Women like Diana, they think they want freedom until they taste what that freedom actually means. Then, suddenly, they want to shove it all back in the box. Her words hit harder than I wanted to admit. Because she was right. Diana had spent weeks talking about this fantasy of an open marriage, the thrill of other men, the need to explore. But the second she saw me with another woman, touched another woman, she unraveled. She hadn't expected me to embrace the same freedom she had craved. Bobby tilted her head. And what about you, Teddy? Do you want to shove it all back in the box? I lifted my glass, taking a slow sip of my bourbon. I'm still deciding. A wicked smile curled on her lips. Well, let me help you make up your mind. She slid an envelope across the table. I glanced at it, but didn't reach for it. What's this? Diana's contract, she said, her voice smooth. You signed it without hesitation, which means you read every word. And if you read every word, then you saw the clause I added. I finally picked it up, opening it. It was the original contract, the one that laid out the terms of our so-called open marriage. And there, in legal print, was the clause Bobby had mentioned. A clause Diana hadn't noticed. A clause that stated, in the event of mutual infidelity, all financial protections remain intact and all prior agreements remain in effect unless both parties agree to dissolve the contract. I looked up at Bobby. So, she leaned in, her perfume subtle but intoxicating. So, Diana can't just erase what's been done. If she wants you back, she has to earn you back. Her meaning was clear. Diana had played the game, thinking she had all the power. But Bobby had given me the power. Now I had options. Bobby smirked. I always wondered why Diana got to have you all to herself. I've watched you for years, steady, loyal, powerful in ways you don't even realize. Her fingers traced the rim of her glass. And now, you're a man who finally knows his worth. I felt something shift inside me. For years, I had been the dependable one, the devoted husband, the man who sacrificed. But now, sitting across from Bobby, feeling her hunger, her desire, I realized I had never been the one in control. Until now. Bobby leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Come home with me tonight, Teddy. I should have hesitated, but I didn't. I drained my bourbon, set the glass down, and met her gaze. Lead the way. And just like that, I walked through a door I knew I could never close. Diana sat at the breakfast table, her fingers gripping the porcelain coffee cup so tightly I thought it might shatter. She hadn't touched her toast, hadn't taken a sip of her drink, hadn't looked me in the eyes since I walked in. But I could feel her watching me, studying me. I took my time, poured my coffee, stirred in cream, flipped open the newspaper. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was small, hesitant, so different from the confident woman who had once slid a contract across this very table. Denise called me last night. I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch, sipping my coffee, waiting for her to continue. She said she's falling for you. I turned a page of the newspaper. Did she? Diana swallowed. Her hands trembled as she set the cup down. She told me if I can't make you happy, she will. That I had my chance, and I threw it away. I flipped another page, unread. Sound about right. She inhaled sharply, like I had slapped her. Teddy, please. I folded the newspaper and finally met her gaze. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. There was something in her expression I hadn't seen in years. Fear. I thought this was what you wanted, I said calmly. Tears welled in her eyes. I did. I thought, she swallowed hard. I thought it would be different. I thought it would be fun, exciting. But it wasn't. It was cold, empty, meaningless. I arched an eyebrow. And yet, you expected me to sit here, waiting for you. She shook her head violently. No, she stopped, clenching her fists, struggling to find the words. I never thought about what it would be like if you were the one someone else wanted. If you were the one who became desirable. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. And now. Her voice cracked. Now I know what it feels like to be the one left behind. For the first time, she understood. She had been so eager to experience something new, so certain that I would remain the safe, predictable man I had always been. But now the balance had shifted. I was the one with options, and she was the one afraid. She reached for my hand. I let her touch me, but I didn't squeeze back. Teddy, she whispered, I love you. I tilted my head. Do you love me? Or do you just fear losing me? Her face twisted with pain. I held her gaze, making her sit with the question, making her feel the weight of it. Because for the first time in our marriage, I had the power. And Diana? She was the one struggling to hold on. I never used to think of myself as the kind of man who had options. For 25 years, Diana had been my entire world. I had built a life around her, sacrificing, compromising, adapting, because that's what husbands do. I thought that was enough. I thought that was love. But now, for the first time in my life, I saw things differently. And so did she. I could see it in the way she looked at me, eyes clouded with regret, uncertainty, and something that looked a lot like fear. She had always been secure in my devotion, safe in the knowledge that I belonged to her and her alone. But that certainty was gone now, shattered the moment I kissed Denise in front of her, the moment I walked out the door without explaining where I was going. Now, I had options, and that terrified her. I sat across from Diana at the dinner table, the air between us heavy with unspoken truths. She had made my favorite meal, steak, medium rare, with garlic mashed potatoes and asparagus. The effort was obvious. "You didn't have to do all this," I said, cutting into the steak. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her wine glass. I wanted to. I let the words hang. She wanted to. That was new. I took my time eating, watching her. She barely touched her food, instead stealing glances at me, waiting. She was waiting for me to reassure her, to tell her things could go back to the way they were. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, took a sip of my bourbon, and asked, "So who was he?" She flinched. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, she whispered, "Does it matter?" I tilted my head. "It used to." Her breath hitched. I set my glass down. "I spent years being yours, Diana. Never questioned it. Never even looked at another woman. But now, suddenly, I'm realizing something." "What?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, slow and deliberate. "I'm not just your husband anymore. I'm a man with options." The words hit her like a physical blow. Her fork clattered against her plate, and her chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. "Teddy, I don't want this anymore. I don't want an open marriage. I just want us." I held her gaze, unwavering. "The problem is, I'm not sure I want that anymore." Her face crumbled. "Don't say that." "But it's the truth." Her fingers clenched around the tablecloth. "So what now? You keep seeing other women? Denise? Bobby?" I shrugged. "Maybe." A tear slid down her cheek. "And me? Do I just wait? Hope you choose me again?" I didn't answer, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure what I wanted. That night, she reached for me in bed. It was hesitant, almost desperate, her fingers ghosting over my arm like she was afraid I'd disappear. I didn't pull away, but I didn't respond either. "Teddy," she whispered, "please." Her lips brushed my neck, her body pressing into mine, warm and familiar. But it wasn't the same. The dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the neglected husband clinging to whatever affection she was willing to give. I was the one in control now. I turned to face her, cupping her chin. "You wanted freedom," I murmured. "How does it feel?" A choked sob escaped her. I was wrong. I stroked her cheek with my thumb, watching the way she leaned into my touch, desperate for reassurance. I could give it to her. I could tell her it was okay, that we could put this behind us. But could we? Did I even want to? Her lips trembled. "Teddy, I love you. I don't want anyone else." I traced the curve of her jaw, tilting her face up to mine. "But now you know what it feels like, don't you?" She nodded, tears slipping down her face. I kissed her then, not out of passion, but possession. She had made me question my worth, my desirability. And now? Now, she was the one afraid of losing me. I deepened the kiss, making her feel what it was like to want someone who might not be there tomorrow. She melted against me, gasping my name. But as I pulled her closer, I realized something. I wasn't sure if I was doing this out of love or revenge. The house felt different now. It was still the same four walls, the same furniture, the same framed wedding photos hanging by the staircase. But the air inside was heavier, charged, like a storm waiting to break. Diana stood in the kitchen, her back to me, hands braced on the counter. She had barely touched her wine. "Do you remember our first apartment?" she asked suddenly, her voice fragile. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Yeah." She let out a breathy laugh. "The radiator was always broken. We used to pile under 3 blankets just to keep warm." I nodded, but said nothing. She turned then, and I saw the desperation in her eyes. The kind that seeps into a person's bones when they realize they might have ruined something irreplaceable. I've been such a fool, Teddy. Her voice cracked. I thought I wanted freedom. I thought I wanted adventure. But the second I saw you with Denise, the second I felt what it was like to lose even a part of you. She swallowed hard. I didn't know it would feel like dying. A long silence stretched between us. She was waiting for me to rush in, to tell her it was okay, to fold her in my arms and erase the past month like it never happened. But I didn't move. Do you know what the worst part is? She whispered, gripping the counter like it was the only thing keeping her upright. It's not just that I hurt you. It's that I saw you change. You're not the same man who signed that contract. No, I said quietly. I'm not. She took a step forward. I miss you. I miss us. I exhaled slowly, measuring my next words. You didn't think about us when you handed me that contract, Diana. Tears welled in her eyes. I know. God, I know. She stepped closer, reaching for my hand, but I pulled back. She flinched like I had struck her. You were so sure I'd be fine, I continued. You were so sure that I'd sit here, twiddling my thumbs while you ran off to explore. You never imagined a world where I might be the one they wanted, where I might be the one who had options. She squeezed her eyes shut, a tear slipping down her cheek. I was selfish, she whispered. I was stupid. I let the words hang between us. You were, I agreed. She let out a quiet sob. Is it too late? I hesitated. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was the turning point. The moment where I decided whether the past 25 years of marriage were strong enough to withstand the last 30 days. Could I forgive her? Could I unsee the way she had looked at me when she first suggested the open arrangement? Like she was excited to leave me behind? Could I forget the way my name had been passed between Denise and Bobby like a prize they were eager to claim? Diana stepped even closer, her hands trembling. Teddy, I don't care about anyone else. I don't care about anything else. I just want my husband back. She was breaking, shattering right in front of me. And the strangest part? I wasn't sure if I wanted to pick up the pieces. For so many years, I had loved her without question, without hesitation. But now I had seen the other side. I had tasted the power of being wanted, of being desired in a way that Diana hadn't desired me for a long time. Could I go back to being the man who worshipped her without resentment? Could I trust that she wouldn't wake up a year from now and crave another thrill? I searched her face for the answer. And for the first time in our marriage, she was the one waiting, terrified that I might walk away. I let out a slow breath. Go to bed, Diana, I said softly. She looked up at me, eyes wide with hope. Are you coming? I didn't answer. I turned, walked out of the kitchen, and left her standing there, alone, just as she had once left me. The decision would come, but not tonight. Tonight, she could sit in the silence and feel what it was like to lose me. Maybe then she'd understand.